So today we're talking about why old buildings still matter. This comes across our work pretty often when people are considering whether to keep an old building, renovate it, or maybe tear it down, do new construction, do something different, more intense, something like that. So I think we just want to talk a little bit about why these old buildings still matter. So if someone, Jen, were to come across the office and say, I'm thinking about tearing this building down, or, I'm going to renovate it, what would you tell them?
Well, first, let's look at the building. What is the building? What shape is the building in? Maybe you shouldn't demolish it. Maybe there's some funding sources that would actually work in your favor if you kept the building. I don't think we're here to twist anybody's arm, but I think there are good reasons to take a second look. Yeah.
Aaron, same question. What would you say to, let's say that you're trying to convince them to keep the building in this case?
Which is often the case for me. I would say that the first thing that I would think about is what would happen if it were gone, because everybody has grand ideas of replacing a building with something new, but how often does that happen? It's like 1 in 1,000 times that somebody actually builds something new. So there's that. So when it's gone, now you have an empty space. Are we okay with that? 2, tax revenue. There is a building there now. When the building's gone, no longer any really real estate value. So there's a hurt to the city from that perspective. 3, local shared history. The buildings that exist in a town, in a city, are a part of the story of all of the people that live there in some way. Whether it's our family worked there, I worked there, my grandfather worked there, we bought groceries there, whatever it is, there's always something. And when the building is gone, there's kind of some bit of lost history that you don't ever get back, other than through stories.
Ever.
Yeah. There's that project that we've been working on, well, actually since I've started, so that's been over 10 years ago, down in Sterling, on the riverfront there. It's the Lawrence and the Stanley National buildings, and they're right on the riverfront. They're huge, and they're just like a big impact on the city of Sterling and are a huge part of their history. And I know, 10 years ago, they were looking at what if we tore all of these down and what could we build on the same site? And at that time, we kind of came forward with the idea of keeping them. And so started digging into how do you renovate them? Do you keep all of them? Do you demo portions of it? How do you make it work? And I feel like Sterling stuck to that plan because it was such a big part of their psyche. Like almost everyone in that town either worked there, knew someone who worked there, had a grandpa, an uncle, someone who worked there and had a story there. And a couple years ago, we ended up doing these like memory walking tours with people who used to work there. So when we're thinking about the new renovation, we wanted to capture their stories. And so there's really nothing that can replace that, of them telling us, well, this is where, my buddy and I used to work, and we would hang out here when we had breaks and, do the weighing here, and we would take the product from this place over to that place, and I did that every day for 20 years. And like there's these stories that are captured in those buildings, and I think that was like it was really impactful just to hear so many of those one after another, because we know that the buildings tell the story of a place, but then to actually hear the people who worked there telling those stories was pretty cool. And those buildings now have another chance at capturing those again, because the same people who walked through and who were interested in are talking about their memories, are interested in like, if this was apartments, this would be a great place to live. And so maybe they'll have a second history with it.
Well, and I think also if you think about where those buildings are situated, they are right on the river. There's not even a walking path there. They are right on the river, which is such a different perspective to have if you have an apartment right on the river. And if those were to be torn down, you could not go back in that same location.
You're not going back in the same spot.
So, sometimes you want to take advantage of the positioning of where they were built originally.
Yeah, it would never get built the same way.
No.
Like,
Mm-mm.
even if you tried to replicate it in some ways, the materials would be different.
Yeah.
It just wouldn't have that same character. And I know we come across this too pretty often of like building, tearing something down and thinking, well, it'd be cheaper to start over. And to your point, Jen, it's like, well, maybe, because there's also these funding sources that exist for historic buildings that don't necessarily for new construction.
And there's often it seems, anyways, I don't know if it's really the case in city staff perspective, but it seems that there is often the perception from the general public that demolition is like free.
Yeah.
The building is an eyesore. I mean, there are a lot of examples of that around. The buildings are an eyesore. They're dangerous. They're a danger to the public. We should demo them because we'll be ahead at that point. Well, demolition of something like the building we're talking about, or some of the ones down the river here, I mean, millions of dollars to demolish, and then you're left with a blank site. So it's not even
right. And then let's talk about what the landfill. Like, now you're filling up a landfill with tons and tons of masonry, concrete. Embodied energy is really what it's all about. And a lot of times we don't give existing buildings the green credit I think that they should be given. You're not paying for the energy to produce these materials. Again, they're already in place. You're not paying, you don't have additional gas emissions because you're trucking materials from a location. It's already there, and most of the time, these buildings are pretty well built. They're usually masonry bearing, sometimes concrete framed, or timber framed, and exposing those materials where you can are, that's half of it right there. I mean, no one does that, rarely anymore. We've been through numerous new construction projects. We've done new construction, and the cost to build in that same manner is just
it's not feasible.
It's not feasible.
Yeah. I mean, even when it's a full gut job, you have to replace all of the windows, all of the lights, all the flooring material, all of the HVAC.
Still not cheap.
You'd have to do that for pretty much any building, whether it was
Sure.
new construction or not. But you at least then still have that shell and capture, some of that embodied energy, and then just the base. And it keeps the story, right? So it's kind of a triple threat.
Yeah.
Was that 3?
Double threat.
Double threat.
It's at least a double threat.
At least.
I think one thing that surprised me about doing existing buildings or adaptive reuse of structures is that people come to us with a variety of reasons for doing this. Sometimes there's just plain old passion. Sometimes they think it's a good deal. Sometimes there's like a funding source that's a kind of, I think pushing them towards it. But I have always negated, going back to the passion piece, that sometimes people just want to do it if they've got the money and they just think it's the right thing to do for the community. And I think the brew house is an example of that. The owners said that in one of our job meetings, and I'll never forget that he wanted to give back to Rockford. And we often forget that sometimes people just want to do a good thing, which is preserving the history and the story of their community.
It's not always about how can I make the most the most money on this project,
right.
Whatever it is.
Yes.
I don't want to lose money necessarily, but
right. And a lot of times that's how people come to us, how can I make money on this particular project? And I would say that most of the time it's difficult with existing buildings, but there are so many tools as well that, are available if you're willing to put in the work and really the extra math.
Yeah, and sometimes it's, like legacy. In the case of the brew house, it was built for one reason, but the legacy of the building continues because of, you know, the investment that was made. And so it's kind of their legacy now too, of their legacy of in the community and this commitment. And I think that's come up a couple times too, of buildings, you know, originally, you know, sometimes you see on the building, it's like the McClure 1886, and it has it like written right on the building. It almost seems like there should be like another placard for whoever continues to invest in that building over time.
It's a timeline.
Yeah, because
a living timeline.
They're prolonging the lifetime of that building, and it's equally, you know, their legacy. And we've heard that from some of our clients too, is, you know, I want this to be something I pass to my kids.
Right.
And so that's pretty cool to have them commit that way.
And they're massive catalytic projects. You know, again, looking at the brew house here, this building, which was 7 buildings at one point coming together, was done, I want to say it was 2012. And Rockford at the time was kind of just coming out of, there was just starting to be some more downtown development. And this was one of those projects where people started to come back downtown for no reason outside of meeting friends, having a drink, you know, whatnot. And that's this project. I kind of tell people it gave Rockford its backbone back, I guess, backbone back. I don't know, but like it gave it its confidence. Like, hey, we're actually a cool city.
We can have nice stuff.
We can have nice things. You know, we can do that. And yeah, that's what I love to see, how it morphs, how one project will morph into another one.
Yeah. Erin, do you think, so like downtown Monroe, your hometown, great square, you can go in the middle, it has the courthouse, it's kind of wrapped by buildings all around. What do you think, if there were gaps in those buildings, in those street faces, how do you think that would impact how downtown feels? Because right now it feels very vibrant and like a very complete place.
Yeah.
But
which is pretty, and it is pretty complete. There are a couple missing components here and there, but they're not substantial in poor locations at corners. But I think it would change it dramatically. And I didn't immediately go to other towns where you're walking down the street and there is that opening. People do get creative and place it's not uncommon to see like a beer garden or something there. But it's still not the same thing as a building where you have the storefront activity, you have the different layers of the building. I think that's the other thing that's maybe a challenge if you don't maintain existing buildings or keep existing buildings. It's very hard to build back like they are from a zoning perspective, from a construction feasibility perspective, from all of those perspectives. And so you don't get the layers or the intricacies that make a lot of our existing, especially downtown buildings, interesting to pedestrians as you're walking. So even if you're not necessarily buying something, there's something to look at. And I mean, storefronts were, prior to maybe the catalog and internet era, what people, I'm just exploring, walk around downtown and see what they have, see what people are selling. A way to connect with the community, but it does change the environment completely. There's the other side of it is activity. As soon as a building's gone, that's one less place people are going in and out of.
Or living.
Exactly. And every time you reduce that number, the vibrancy go down some. You're going to lose. You're going to lose. If there's 2 apartments upstairs, you're losing 2 to 4 people that are going in and out of a building. Business owner on the first floor. Even if it's only one business, you're losing a business owner plus employees plus the people that go in and out of the store. So there's definitely loss in activity for every vacant lot. And so thinking about Monroe, I feel like we're pretty fortunate in that most of it's intact. And most of the storefronts are occupied.
Do you think that was intentional? Like, do you have a review process, or are there committees that have made sure that people aren't tearing down or removing?
I think that in some ways we were just fortunate that not a lot of people had a whole lot of thoughts about downtown. There was not, everything was semi-used. I think about the rural communities, a lot of the smaller cities that we work in some ways are kind of isolated from the big swings.
Right.
The big swings like Rockford or Sterling, even though it's mainly because the more rural cities that are smaller are not necessarily so heavy in one industry. You know, there's the downtown commercial district, and then there were smatterings of other things going on, but it wasn't as if there was the downtown district era where everything happened down there and then everything left. It was small enough, we're insulated enough from the big swings that there was never the major migration. It's not a suburb of a bigger city. It was that's actually probably, now thinking about it, that's probably one of the things that helped was our county courthouse was in the center. The building still exists there. It doesn't function as the courthouse anymore, but that kept people coming downtown. So,
but county government still occupies it, right? Like
yeah,
they never left it and just kind of abandoned building. They kind of kept that investment in the core and maintained the building. They just did a huge investment for all of the copper work and the exterior there. It looks amazing.
Yeah, because people have, fortunately, people have recognized that the building is of value, that the cost to renovate it is absolutely worth the investment for the long-term health of the city, which is that's not super common.
And it's a bit of your brand too.
Yeah.
You know,
it's
shows
literally
up.
On this.
Yeah. It's the logo of the town.
It is the logo. Yeah. It's funny. The county courthouse clock tower is the logo for the city.
Yeah, because everyone loves it.
Not the city hall.
Yeah.
Not, anyways.
Yeah.
But
that makes sense though.
Yeah. One thing I didn't talk about, but that I feel like I think about every time we walk through old buildings, especially, but not exclusively, but especially the old industrial buildings, is you walk through and, they're built to whatever. The Sterling, the Sterling building is built to what I think I found a label on one of the floors that it's built to hold 500 pounds a square foot or something crazy like that. But that one, we won't build like that anymore. No. But one of the advantages of that is that we can do pretty much anything with them. Disadvantage is if they fall into disrepair, they're incredibly expensive to demolish, which I would say in some ways is a benefit though too. But we will never, if we were all new construction, because of the market, because of the difficulty, the cost of construction and the labor available and everything, we just don't build the same way that we do. So in 100 years, somebody in our position would not be able to walk through the same. If it weren't for these buildings, we wouldn't exist.
Right.
Like there would be no, which is kind of sad to even think about, but that that is a whole segment. You mentioned earlier the preserving things for another generation. Or the kind of the markers in time, lifetime of a structure. It's, we talk about it with the Eugene Hotel. It's kind of had two lives. There was a building in there originally. The story is a little bit fuzzy on what happened at the transition, but there was an initial life and then a major reconstruction, and it had a new life as a hotel and then other things, and now it's going to have a new life again, all in the same.
But that kind of makes a lot of sense if you really think about how that building is structured or how it's laid out. It makes sense. But the things were built more adaptable at that point too. One of the side effects of more technology, more complex building systems, are just not as adaptable anymore.
Yeah, they're kind of like single user built. Like if you think of a bank building now versus how banks were built early 1900s, like a lot of the bank buildings from 1900s, we've worked on a few where they're renovated into restaurants and apartments versus, a bank building now is kind of single story. It's got its drive through. It would be really hard to repurpose it as much other than as a bank or maybe an office, but it's like it's not as adaptable versus the storefronts we have now. It's big, wide open space, and it's not too big. I think downtowns too.
Scale is super important.
We need some smaller storefronts so people can try out their business and see if it's something that's gonna work or if they need to expand into a bigger space. But just like bite-sized storefronts to try their product. The other story I wanted to kind of share about like what does the history of a building mean to people. I sometimes share the story of the brew house here of it was a kid I went to high school with. We were in history class together. I know that they didn't care much about history, but then there was one day here where I ran into him, and he was like giving a tour of the place and pointing out all these different and like and this part of the building did this, and this is where they sorted the grain, and this is where they did the bottling. And so like he was telling the history of this particular place, and so that resonated, to be like physically in this space and telling that story to other people, even though, you know, I don't know what kind of grade he got in history class, but it wasn't. I don't think he was
I think
A+.
I did terrible in history, actually.
I loved history.
Oh, well, you would.
It is funny. We all, I think, regardless of academically whether or not we did well or enjoyed history, as we age, I feel like there's an appreciation more for a place or the story of a place, the stories that exist. I had absolutely no connection to this building prior to being here. But the story is still incredibly interesting. And I think partially because there's that personal connection to you, or you feel a personal connection to it, the building becomes a little bit more human. You don't have, and the materials that it were built, that it was built out of, you know, we're surrounded by hand formed brick. They're not the same in any perspective, and not set up perfectly,
Right.
not laid perfectly. There's some, you can tell the marks of human interaction. And that's
and when we do barns, you know, sometimes those barns are hand hewn. That
Yeah.
means like they were done probably when Lincoln was around.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
it's
And you can see some of their mistakes too, which is like, you know, just kind of
reassuring in
humanizing.
some ways.
Yeah. Yeah. Like they were humans working on these buildings. They weren't perfect. But I think that's kind of the fun thing when we come across it, is like, well, that might have just been a mistake. Sometimes it's like, I wonder why they did this. And then sometimes it's just like, maybe they didn't mean to.
But then you come across these stories of, you're like, holy cow, how intuitive. Like, what is this thing and what is it doing? And then you find out the true history of it, and you're like, that's brilliant.
It's very inventive.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It is funny working with my dad and brothers in the past on different things. There are a number of times where the situation leads you to doing something that if you were not there in the moment, it would make absolutely no sense. And the joke was always, they're going to wonder what in the world we were thinking when they open this up in 50 years.
You just leave them a note.
Yeah, just leave them a note.
We meant to do this.
Trust us.
Really, this was the best option, I promise.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is the human aspect, I think, is an important one, because a lot of modern materials as well, not that they're all bad, I'm not saying they're bad, but it's just, they're different.
Yeah.
It's a different feel.
And a lot of them are not natural. So you see the replication of a wood look in everything now, from flooring to paneling to cement board. I mean, it's to felt ceiling boards, you know, or tiles, and it's fine, but it still isn't wood.
Everybody's searching for that real.
Yes.
I think the market recognizes that people like natural materials.
Yes.
And they
Yeah,
try to
replicate it in all these different ways.
And it's funny. We try to replicate it in very expensive materials when there are natural ones that exist. And there are maybe advantages to, you know, like acoustic advantages to certain things, but the human side is I think very important, both from a community side, like we talked about, that you're connecting with community, walking down a street, an urban place. Not that all of the buildings that I think are worth saving are always in downtown directly, but a lot of them are on a street where you're interacting. You have the opportunity to interact with people. And we all, whether we admitted it or not, probably, I think everybody would deep down, we all want human connection. Sometimes it's connection to craftsmen in the past, seeing that, oh, hey, they weren't perfect either. I do an okay job for what I'm doing now. Because it's not, I think that's the other thing, is we're accused of being building huggers or like save all buildings. That's not the case.
Yeah. I mean, sometimes it's unfortunate, but we have to say goodbye to some buildings.
Yeah. And they didn't do everything perfect. And probably what we see now are a lot of the buildings that well, obviously they survived, so they were probably the better ones of the
Mm-hmm.
it's not like it's 100% retention.
Well, and sometimes when we try and look at new uses or taking a building into something different or adapting it, we can't find something to fit perfectly.
Yeah. They tend to be the ones that we might have to say bye to are the ones that seem to be like the least adaptable. So the more
Yeah.
adaptable the building is, the more opportunity there is for the renovation of some new modern use. The people who constructed it never even knew that
It
type of
didn't
thing would
exist,
exist. But then, the harder ones are always the theaters, the churches.
Yep.
These things they were purpose built and they're cool in their own right. But in some ways, it also is a challenge for the
Yep.
building renovation if you don't want to do that exact thing again, because
The spaces just
Yeah.
they're not easily they're not easily adapted. It's a
Mm-hmm.
the purpose built site is interesting to think about. We are very purpose built now. In many ways, we've made things by trying to make things very specific and very efficient. We've made them very complex. Whereas buildings before were generally, the structure was all the same: heavy timber or brick or stone, depending on where you're at, which everybody had
Access to.
they had access to.
Mm-hmm.
And the flooring was wood, usually semi-local. In our area, a lot of oak and a lot of pine and a lot of maple. And you didn't really vary outside of that. And so the materials were a craftsman from anywhere could work on them. You didn't have a whole bunch of super specialized trades. And the KISS method, I guess, was maybe I don't know that they thought of it that way, but it is what we benefit from, the simplicity of the structures. If somebody lives in a community, they like a lot of the things a lot of the buildings that exist, but there's a couple that they want to know what they can do themselves. What is something that you would give? What advice would you give someone who's not a professional developer, community member, but just passionate? What are some steps they can take?
I think if it's like a smaller building, usually a lot of these towns have like a facade grant that could help with the facade renovation. And sometimes that goes a long way. It could be a new coat of paint, or it could be something more intensive. But even just kind of like uncovering and peeling back, what happened a lot in the 70s, 80s was like covering up a lot of those details because maybe they were starting to need some maintenance, and it's like, just cover them up so we don't have to look at it. At this point now, probably the boards that went up then need more maintenance than the thing that's behind it. So I think just like peeling off those things and getting a sense of what is really like the base materials, what's the condition. And that's good like aesthetically, but also just it needs to be addressed at some point if it is in bad maintenance, because otherwise you're going to have bigger problems down the road.
And we come across that a lot. A lot of our clients have these mansard roof structures that have covered these beautiful storefront transoms over time. And I think one of the things we ask to do immediately is, let's tear that off. Let's see what's behind it.
Yeah.
Because there's usually, I would say maybe half the time there are pieces of that building still left there.
And as long as it's still stable, just showing that original material, even if it's not perfect, there's actually a little, there's a little character with it. So it doesn't have to look perfect. It's fine to see some of the areas like that maybe need to be touched up in the future. But if you can't do it right now, it's probably still better to just peel that off and see those features and let everyone kind of enjoy them. And there's usually a little bit of funding behind that, facade grants. Sometimes they can range from like $5,000 to $15,000. Just kind of helps lift the space up.
And then it gets contagious. And then the guy next to that storefront is like, well, wait a second, my storefront doesn't look so hot.
Nobody likes the comparison, right?
No,
I don't want to be
it's like the
ugly
neighbor
one on
mowing the
block.
grass.
Yeah, it's true. It is true. And those little steps, I think people often get afraid because I don't have the money to renovate the entire building. But like you said, little things can make a big difference. Even just a coat of paint can
Yeah.
make a difference. Coat of paint, probably some caulk in a couple of places where there's stop the water.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, check out that roof would be the other like follow up. That's another good investment. You don't want that water in the building.
And then what would you do if they came to you and said, hey, I want to gut this place and I want to do something completely different, and
Shake their hand.
Yeah, give me some advice.
I don't know. For a lot of people, we help them just like, okay, let's help you figure out how much that's going to cost. Let's kind of do conceptual idea of everything you want to put in there. We can think about it in phases. So maybe you don't have to do it all at once. You can do like phase 1, and then in 5 years you do phase 2. But we look at the financials too, which I think helps our clients a lot, and also helps our clients talk to the city and the bank to say, this is the project, this is the estimated cost, and then of course they're interested, what's my return on investment? So we can look at that and see if there's any gaps in that, but also start identifying funding sources. So like facade grant might be one of them, but also there's the potential for historic tax credits or TIF funds, and a variety of other things that we could look at to see if there's funding sources to help them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there's a lot of. I was just talking to a city administrator of a small municipality not far from here about a particular building in their downtown this morning, and I in passing kind of made the comment that you're probably similar to many municipalities. It's not like you have a bunch of money you're sitting on to give out.
Mm-hmm.
And his response was, yes, but we also recognize that there's going to have to be some incentive because it's not an easy thing to get done.
Mm-hmm.
And so there may be more available, maybe more options available even at the local municipality level than people are aware of.
Right.
I think a lot of times, and I'm guilty of this as well, like be afraid to ask because, you don't want to be told no. But
Right. And there are smaller grants sometimes that are available as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's things like, like Landmarks Illinois has a couple grants. Sometimes like your local community foundation will support something that's either historic or like cultural history. So it might not be exactly building related, but if you're doing something that's restoring a building, that might be a funding source.
And sometimes the funding sources themselves have lower, say, percentages if you do a thing, such as I'm thinking of, is it PACE financing, where if your construction is, say, all Energy Star, or it's mindful of things like that. So I think there are the type of funding source, be it a loan, can kind of vary too, depending on what you're looking for.
Yeah, like the ComEd rebates too,
Yep.
for like upgrading your lighting, going to LED. And, sometimes it's like, well, how many things do I have to do and how many applications do I have to do to get this done? And
It's some work.
it is some work, yeah. But usually, how else are you going to get those funds?
It's not growing on trees.
It's not growing on trees. Even if you have investors, it's like only worthwhile for them up to a certain dollar amount, right? So you still have to fill that gap with other pieces, even if they can be, I don't want to say painful, but it's some work.
And we've seen some of our clients get very crafty or creative in the way they've structured some of their projects, by way of bringing in multiple partners of over a dozen, I think we had somebody do. So that was really interesting because it wasn't, it was a little bit more community, I felt like, minded, instead of just like a person doing a project. He invited people to participate and become part of this, small development.
Yeah.
You get more buy-in and more people interested then as well. More people are on the team advocating for it.
Yeah, then you have like 12 people saying, hey, you should check out this place rather than just one. Yeah.
All right. One other question. Why do you care about old buildings?
Why do you care?
Why do you care? Why do they matter? What is interesting to you about them? Like I know that you didn't go to school to study old buildings. So why do you as an urban planner or planitect care about, why are you passionate about existing buildings?
It just felt like the place that felt somewhere. Like it felt like it really is a place. So before I even knew what urban planning was, and I would drive like from U of I back home up this way, I would always go off the interstate and go through the small towns and look for their little business district sign and like follow it. And sometimes it would just be like 7 buildings in there, but like that was always the coolest part of that town. And sometimes, you know, there might only be like 1 occupied space within it, depending on what they have going on. But that was the place that felt like somewhere. Well, there's like a little core, a little, you know, node of activity and like these cool buildings that could be renovated again. And yeah, I think more so it's just like this is where people gather and people have invested time and energy over time, even if it's not currently super active.
And it's particular to that place.
Yeah.
Like you said, it feels like somewhere. I think that's one of the things that's interesting is that a lot of the existing buildings, you're not going to find a duplicate. You find a lot of repeating elements or a lot of repeating things.
Yeah, there's like a lot of similarities between downtowns.
You're speaking the same language.
Yep.
But it's not the same story.
Yep.
Every time. You were going to say?
Well, I was going to say people don't come to your town to go to the strip mall that everybody has on the outskirts of their city. If you're wanting to dive into somebody's, you know, like if you're coming into Rockford or Monroe, you're looking for the downtown. You know, that is the character, that is the defining, you know, soul of that city. And
what is Rockford? I want to see Rockford.
Right.
I just got that text message the other day from a friend of ours that said, I'm in Rockford. What do I need to see? Where do I go? What play? He asked specifically about architecture as well, which warmed my heart. But particular to the place.
Absolutely.